we have seen for a couple days now jousting back and forth of, I'm going to call them leaked documents between the NCAA and Will Wade's attorney. Basically, you did this, no, I didn't, back and forth. What do you make of this exchange as we head to the IARP phase?
Yeah, no, I think it's exactly what you just said, Charles. Man, it's one side trying to paint the other as the bad guy or as the, guilty party, I guess is maybe even the better way to put it. Obviously, look, I thought it was just as interesting, the documentation that Will Wade's lawyer presented yesterday. We got an explanation, whether anybody believes it or not, about the comment that he made on Wiretap that was played on the documentary. So to me, it's exactly what you just said. It's each side trying to paint each other in a certain way. But I will say, for LSU fans who have followed this day by day for really the better part of 2.5 years, I think we're inching towards a resolution here because, as you referenced, the independent group is going to be looking at this thing here, who knows when. But the NCAA believes that they have a case as of right now. We don't know exactly what they have other than rumors and accusations, and we'll see here over the coming days and weeks.
Where's the burden of proof, Aaron? I mean, we have so little experience with this council, the IARP. This is an independent group from the NCAA. Who has the burden of proof here?
Well, you would think that the burden of proof would be on the NCAA, right? And so for people who don't really understand, I mean, first of all, you can kind of equate it to the criminal justice system, right? Everyone is presumed innocent and they have to be proven guilty by the courts. And what has essentially happened throughout the history of NCAA law enforcement is it's really kind of insane when you think about it, is the NCAA is basically judge, jury, and executioner in the sense that they come to your campus, they try to figure out what you did wrong. You tell them what the school did wrong. Then the school tries to defend themselves, and then they're defending themselves against the NCAA. And so what this independent counsel is supposed to do is be a third party, have no vested interest in the outcome other than finding the quote-unquote accurate or correct outcome. And that's what's going to be so interesting. There's a few schools for people who are kind of in that LSU bubble. Memphis is going through the same thing with the James Wiseman accusation. NC State was caught up in this pretty early in the process, and they have a history with the NCAA that they don't believe that they can essentially get a fair trial from the NCAA, and they're going through this process. So LSU, I could be mistaken, but I believe they're the third team that appears to be going through this process with this independent counsel, and we have no precedent and no idea what they value, what will be important, or what their verdicts will be based on, Charles.
It was Kansas, which is the other one. And the reason I asked about burden of proof with regard to the independent counsel is we know how the NCAA operates. Is this how this independent body will also operate? Because we just don't have a whole lot of precedent here.
There's literally zero precedent. But it was this council, and I'm sure you guys have explained it over the last day or so on this show, but this council was put into place for exactly what we've just spent the last 2 or 3 minutes talking about, which is that it really, at its most basic concept, the NCAA justice system really isn't very fair. And not to say that schools haven't broken NCAA rules in the past, and not to say that, frankly, whether you like NCAA rules or not, you do have to play by the rule book. But the idea, it's really funny, guys. I'll tell you really quick. Obviously, Oklahoma State was the first school to go through the NCAA process, and they went in front of the NCAA. They got what they believed to be a very unfair, ruling against them, a 1-year postseason ban. But I bring it up because, I basically was talking to Mike Boynton, their head coach, on my podcast, and we were talking about this very concept of how can the NCAA both, investigate you and then also come to a punishment conclusion, punishment phase, whatever you want to call it. It makes no sense. And what's funny about it is this is stuff that Jerry Tarkanian, the legendary UNLV coach, was complaining about literally 40 years ago. So it appears as though we finally have this outside counsel, but we don't yet know how they're going to operate.
And for me, it's just we're sitting here talking. It's like the NCAA thinks, and the NCAA believes that they've got all this information, so much so that they're giving it to someone else, as independent counsel, and they take so long. And I realize that you want to gain all the information that you can possibly get, but it bleeds into years and multiple years, and then that holds a cloud over some of these programs' heads. And the ones that are innocent, I mean, you have a tough time recruiting and getting a positive light on your program when the NCAA, they take as long as they do, and then once they feel like they've got information, then they send it to someone else?
Yeah, well, no, this is a situation that all these schools are dealing with. I mean, not to get super nerdy down the college basketball rabbit hole, but, Arizona, I believe this year had like a 6-person recruiting class, and 5 of the players are international players. And the reason was, I was talking to somebody on their staff, it's because they have questions in the recruiting of American players that they simply can't answer. Louisville had a top prospect decommit probably 2 or 3 weeks ago for this exact reason. He said publicly that, I don't want to go to a school and not know if I'm going to be able to play in the NCAA tournament. So, Jacob, this is a situation that all of these schools are dealing with. I think Penny Hardaway is arguing on his campus, even though obviously you guys know Musa Cisse ended up there, that it has hurt his recruiting as well. So I'm just telling you, Jacob, you guys are not the only ones that feel this way, and you're certainly not the only program being impacted. Like I said, I mean, Arizona just, they were just in a situation where they were getting asked all these questions by these American-born players, and they frankly couldn't answer them. I think Kansas is going through much the same in the schools that I mentioned as well, Jacob. So LSU is by far definitely not alone.
And the NCAA's got the nerve to wonder why they feel why the schools feel like they are being treated unfairly, or at the very least differently. And there's no better example than the cases of North Carolina and Missouri. North Carolina, and they were both academic fraud cases. North Carolina fought them tooth and nail, admitted the classes were bogus, but because they were offered to everybody and not just the student athletes, the NCAA said go and send no more. And Missouri said, you know what, we had a rogue tutor that did this, we admit it, we understand that this is against the rules, please go easy on us. North Carolina got bupkis, and Missouri got just absolutely annihilated. So why the NCAA would have any incredulity to think that a school would think they're going to be treated fairly in this, need only to point to those 2 cases, and those are just the 2 most recent ones that I can think of.
Well, and it's, one of the great tweets that I've ever sent was the day that the North Carolina academic case came down, or excuse me, it was the day that Louisville had to bring down their 2013 postseason banner. For people who don't remember, that was because they basically had strippers in the dorm rooms, and the strippers were considered to be quote unquote extra benefits. Insert your own punchline there. But North Carolina was committing academic fraud for 20 years. And so I tweeted out, if this is really about, about student athletes and, about the educational opportunity that college provides, why are we punishing Louisville for Cinnamon and Destiny, but UNC, nobody cares, 20 years academic fraud? So you could go to all of these cases. You mentioned Missouri. The one that comes to mind for me is one that I fought for 2 or 3 years ago. SMU got a 1-year postseason ban because one tutor was helping one player on the team. The player leaves the program. The tutor is fired. 2 years later, they get a postseason ban. So listen, Charles, I'll just say point blank, you guys are not alone. I mean, it is something that every fan base in America truly doesn't understand. And it's one of those, sometimes guys, some of these narratives that pop up, I think are nonsense and they're overblown. But I do think any individual fan base that just has no idea what they're going to get from the NCAA, and that the NCAA does play favorites, the fact that they seemingly had no interest in investigating all the Zion Williamson Duke allegations, while, what's going on at LSU, what's going on at NC State, on and on and on. I understand the frustration by fans in situations like that.
Hey, Aaron, before we let you go today, let's have a little bit of what's going on in college basketball as far as what the season's looking like. We know the Pac-12 has suspended everything until the spring, and so they're going to be delayed in their basketball season. Obviously, we know within the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC going to move forward with it as right now as it was scheduled. What's the latest you're hearing from some of the Pac-12 teams as far as how they're going to handle this thing?
This is in basketball you're talking about, Jacob?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, listen, I think that the basketball programs are a little frustrated. I had Mick Cronin on my podcast a few weeks ago. His players, at least as of maybe 10 days ago, had not yet returned to campus, and UCLA was not planning on having in-person classes, and he was really frustrated. I mean, and Jacob, it comes down to stuff that guys like the three of us know about, but maybe people that aren't in college athletics don't realize. He was talking about not only the mental health drain of the players being at home, but the mental health drain by the parents of having teenagers that haven't been in the house for years at home. The fact that he's got a 6'10", 270-pound center, and his parents can't afford to feed him. And so it's stuff like that I think is frustrating these coaches. And we'll see what happens. I mean, the big hiccup right now, and it's incredible. I was just thinking about this, guys, right before you called. But, I've gotten into this routine of working out at home, and I was a guy that would wake up every morning and go to the gym. I don't think gyms are open yet in California. I was thinking right before you called, is my gym even open? And so I bring that up because no gyms are open means that basically a lot of these athletic programs are having trouble getting into their facilities to even train. So I know that a lot of the Pac-12 schools, they still have their players at home. Now, some I know like Arizona has their players on campus. There are a few others, but I believe both LA schools and I believe both Bay Area schools, their players are still at home. And so I don't know what has to change. I wish there was more public pressure in Pac-12 country, not to necessarily play games, because I think the Pac-12 is a little bit of a different deal. But we do got to start pushing forward, and we do got to start figuring out a way to get these kids back to campus, because it's like I said, the mental health of them, the physical health of them, and the fact that, as we've all talked about for months now, the safest place that they can be is on campus with their medical staff, with the people around them. I'm with you, Jacob. I don't really have any answers, but I don't think any answers have really been provided. But I do think that even for the basketball programs, it's time to start thinking about the season ahead and get these kids back to campus.
Aaron Torres from Fox Sports Radio, thanks so much for your time. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
No problem, guys. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.